that akhbari thought and akhbari methodology is not completely extinct. When the mukabbir, who is supposed to give the adhan, entered, he requested the audience to calm down a little bit so that they may be able to offer Salatul Jama'ah and have the adhan. Ma in sami al-ustadhu dhalika minhu. As soon as our ustad, Sayyid Mar'ashi Najafi, heard this, his face turned red with anger and he nahiyan al-mukabbir. So he said, Sakit bash, agar in Azadari nabud, namaze jama'at nabud. Instead of helping him and supporting him, he actually scolds the mukabbir and says, shut up. But this is why the message here at Islaah always has been that, look, you can't blindly follow ayatullahs, okay? Just because someone has a huge turban on his head, sisters that you're talking about, or what complaint do you have? They said, oh, these Hoja ladies, they don't have love for Abu Abdullah Hussain. Let the Azadari go on for a few hours, and then, namaz we can even pray at home, we can pray at other times. When Ali al-Akbar marched towards the army of Yazid, how audacious are these people in disobeying their all-merciful creator. Although his name is given as Abdullah ibn al-Hussein, he is al-Radi', who the Muhaqqiq has ascertained was Harmala or Hurmala ibn Kahil.
How brutal were these people? How evil were they?
The correct way to honor his memory and revive his remembrance is to honor the Quran and Sunnah in your own practical life. Okay, Imam Khamenei has this book of lectures that was published. What good comes out of shedding their blood in this manner? وَلَيْسَتْ مِنَ الدِّينِ. It is not part of religion. And there is no doubt that Allah is not pleased with this. He says it does not befit us that we should do actions that will portray our community as people who are people of khurafat. The fact that the Maraja themselves don't engage in these kinds of rituals should show you that there is something wrong with them. Kissing the threshold of the Bari', this is a bid'ah, and it is a very strange and weird bid'ah. Definitely something Imam Hussain alayhi salam would not be proud of. He would never be happy with this. But there are some people who develop a degree of expertise in silencing that voice, the voice of reason, the voice of the conscience. You don't see people in Hajj saying, Ya Ibrahim, labbaik, Ya Ibrahim, labbaik, Ya Hajar, labbaik, Ya Ismail. And it was made the official color by the Abbasids. Their flags used to be black. They used to dress in black. There is no such thing as faqa in Islam, as I had mentioned. Yeah, faqa is just an aborted and failed fast. They promoted the fasting of Ashuras.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to our Muharram series. Today is episode 8. Yesterday we had a quick look at the Usuli interpretation of the rewards of Azadari. I just want to pick up on two things that I did as a reflection for myself from yesterday. And that is, Azadari is to seek knowledge and to derive understanding, the reason of the tragedy. And it is not enough to absolve you of your sins. That's what I learned from yesterday. And the other thing that I learned that was very, very crucial for me was that not all narrators were honest or truthful when it came to putting together information that they were sort of putting together that would then be used in the books thereafter. Today, Syed will be tackling if our reciters right now who are taking up Muharram sessions are actually doing a favor to us, if they are correct or if they are not, if it's beneficial to us, or if they are right or if they are wrong. He will be able to explain a little more in details about this. Syed, you have the floor.
أحسنتم جزاكم الله خيرا. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين وهو خير ناصر ومعين. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. أما بعد, my respected elders, my dearest youngsters, brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In tonight's lecture, I want to look at the issue of the scholarship, the Shia scholarship, particularly the 12-er Imami Shia scholarship, and their approach and their stances when it comes to the Aza and Azadari of Imam Abu Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salam. And we want to examine the claim, because some thinkers believe that they are part of the problem, whereas others see the scholarship as being part of the solution. And so really you can make the case both ways. Very early on, I want to highlight before you, and this is something that many lay people unfortunately fail to realize, that the 12-er Imami Shia scholarship and the scholarly establishment is not one monolithic whole, as people naively assume. They assume that all the maraji', all the mujtahideen, and all the scholars in the hawzat and seminaries of Najaf and Qum and Syria and Lebanon, and all the Shia intellectuals who are part of Western academia, all the 12-er Imami scholarship is on the same page on most of the issues. That is not the case. In fact, you have entire blocks, you have entire lobbies, you have entire subgroups and subsects within the 12-er Imami Shia scholarship. You have some such as Sheikh Ali al-Kawrani who openly say, "Ana mashrabi akhbari." He says, my methodology and my tastes are akhbari. So akhbarism, and by akhbarism we mean that kind of blind, uncritical reliance on the 12-er Imami corpus. That akhbari thought and akhbari methodology is not completely extinct. It does not belong to the age of the dinosaurs. Until a few centuries back, it was the dominant school within Shi'ism, and even today, even though it has retreated, it has undergone a decline, but still it does have its supporters and proponents. So you have some scholars who have an akhbari outlook. Some openly say that, some are ashamed to say that because akhbarism is no longer in vogue, it's no longer fashionable. But if you study their methodology critically, if you look at their attitude and stance towards the hadith corpus, you will clearly be able to see that they are akhbaris, they are closet akhbaris, or neo-akhbaris, as sometimes some would prefer to call them. So you have this movement, and then you have usulis. Within usulis, you have more traditional usulis, you have more critical usulis, you have reformist and revivalist usulis. So you have this Irfani group that is heavily influenced by Sufism, for example. You know, even their very language, the terminology that they use, you know, Nazariyatul Insan al-Kamil, for example, the theory of the perfect man. The perfect man is a Sufi concept. It has no basis in the 12-er Imami Hadith corpus. Al-Insan al-Kamil, these two words never even appear together in the Imami corpus. They're borrowed from Sufism. So you have this whole body of 12-er Imami scholars who on the face of it would appear to you to be 12-er Imami Shia scholars, but in reality, they're following a Sufi-influenced paradigm, and they're also influenced by another deviant group that's called the Shaykhiyya group. The Shaykhiyya group was a deviant fringe outfit that was founded by Sheikh Ahmad al-Ahsa'i, and they were called Shaykhiyya after him because he was their main sheikh. And they had they used to follow Neoplatonic philosophy, and they had these really blasphemous views. They were very firm believers in al-Wilayat Takwiniyya. They were very big on Az-Ziyara al-Jami'a al-Kabira. Sheikh Ahmad al-Ahsa'i is known for his commentary of Az-Ziyara al-Jami'a, and he was declared a heretic and a kafir by the more traditional usuli 12-er Imamiyya scholars of his time. So there are all these multiple opposing camps within the 12-er Imami Shia scholarly establishment, and each camp has its own methodology. They have their own approach. Some of them are critical of ghulu, some of them are actually quite pro-ghulu. And this is something that the people on the ground, unfortunately, especially the lay people, are unable to understand. And that's why when we present them with evidence that shows them the other side of the picture, sometimes they have a difficult time digesting. One such example, for example, when it comes to the question of Azadari, is this famous incident from the life of Ayatollah al-Uzma al-Sayyid Shihabuddin al-Mar'ashi al-Najafi. So what you can see on the screen in front of you, I hope it's clear, Qabasat. This is a hagiography. It's a kind of biography, or a very positive biography of Ayatollah al-Sayyid Shihabuddin al-Mar'ashi al-Najafi. This is Ayatollah Mar'ashi Najafi. And this hagiography, a hagiography is basically a biography that is written from a point of view of praise. And it does not have any criticism or critical appraisal. It's just designed to glorify the person it is written about. So this is not a hostile or anti Ayatollah Mar'ashi book. This is written by one of his most devoted students in praise and in honor of the memory of his ustad. And that's why he has titled his book Qabasat min Hayati Sayyidina al-Ustad Ayatillah al-Uzma al-Allama Shihabuddin al-Mar'ashi al-Najafi Quddisa Sirruhu al-Sharif. Okay, so these are glimpses from the life of our master and Ustad Ayatollah al-Uzma al-Allama Shihabuddin al-Mar'ashi al-Najafi. He's a very famous 12-hour Imami scholar, but he was a very highly traditional scholar. Quddisa Sirruhu al-Sharif. بقلم السيد عادل العلوي. It has been authored by Ayatollah Sayyid Adil al-Alawi. Sayyid Adil al-Alawi was a famous scholar. He passed away in 2021, so not too far back. Now, if you look at this biography, this has actually been published in Qom by the library of Ayatollah al-Uzma al-Mar'ashi al-Najafi. His great library has published this book. If you come here in this book to page 118, you see this heading, Hubbul Hussaini Ajannani, right? The love of, this is the heading of the chapter. The love of Al-Hussain alayhi salam has made me ajannani, majnoon. It has made me go crazy. It has made me go mad. So the purpose of this chapter is to showcase how Ayatollah al-Mar'ashi Najafi had gone completely mad in love of Imam Hussain alayhi salam and in grief over him. But this is obviously from a point of view of praising him. And that's why the author begins by mentioning لَقَدْ امْتَازَ. Sayyid Mar'ashi Najafi had certain imtiyazat, certain unique qualities that distinguished him from the maraji' of taqleed and the fuqaha of his time. And among those things was ظُهُورُ حُبِّهِ الشَّدِيد. He had intense love, which went to the level of ishq for the Ahlul Bayt. And then he goes on to demonstrate the intensity of his love. Now observe carefully. This is page 118, as you can see. He writes, أذكر في غروب يوم عاشوراء في أواخر حياته جاء إلى صحن السيدة المعصومة عليها السلام لصلاة الجماعة، وكانت المواكب الحسينية لا زالت مستمرة، ولا زال الناس يلطمون على الرؤوس والصدور ويضربون الزنجيل على الظهور، وقد علا نحيبهم وبكاؤهم. ولما أقام المكبر للصلاة طلب من الجمهور الهدوء بمقدار صلاة الجماعة. Okay, so what he's describing is a personal incident or an episode from his life that he witnessed with his own eyes. Ayatollah Sayyid Adil al-Alawi the student of Ayatollah Sayyid Shihabuddin al-Marashi Najafi, narrates on the authority of his teacher. He says, I remember on the sunset of the day of Ashura, towards the end of his life, our teacher, Sayyid al-Marashi al-Najafi, came to the shrine of Sayyid al-Ma'suma, peace be upon her, for Salatul Jama'ah, for congregational prayer. And the Hussaini processions was still continuing. And people were still striking their heads and chests and hitting their backs with chains, with zanjir, and their wailing and crying increased. Then he goes on to describe how when Sayyid Shihabuddin al-Marashi al-Najafi entered, وَلَمَّا أَقَابَ الْمُكَبِّرُ لِلصَّلَاةِ طَلَبَ مِنَ الْجَمْهُورِ الْهُدُوءِ. When the mukabbir, who is supposed to give the adhan, entered, he requested the audience to calm down a little bit so that they may be able to offer Salatul Jama'ah and have the adhan. ما إن سمع الأستاذ ذلك منه. As soon as our Ustad, Sayyid Marashi Najafi, heard this, وَكُنْتُ بِجَنْبِهِ, as Sayyid Adil al-Alawi, the author says, I was standing right beside him, إِلَّا وَحْمَرَّ وَجْهُهُ غَضَبًا, except that his face turned red out of anger. Notice, the Azadari is going on full swing. It is time for Salah, and the people show no signs of abandoning the Azah and moving for or getting ready for prayer. So the Mukabbir tries to tell them, calm down, lower your voices, let us have the Adhan, and at least for the duration of the Salah, if you can stop the Azadari and let's have the Salah. As soon as he said this, can you imagine? Ayatollah al-Ughma as-Sayyid Shihabuddin al-Marashi Najafi, his face turned red with anger, and he, Nahiyan al-Mukabbir, he began to forbid the Mukabbir. فَزَجَرَهُ, and he scolded him, he reprimanded him, saying, قائلا, now he quotes his actual word for word verbatim statement in Farsi. So he said, Sakit bash, agar in Azadari nabud, namaz jama'at nabud. These are the exact words of Sayyid Shihabuddin al-Marashi Najafi, produced by his student. He said, Sakit bash, shut up. He's telling the Mukabbir, who is trying to stop the people from the Azah and for them to honor the time of Salah. Instead of helping him and supporting him, he actually scolds the Mukabbir and says, shut up. If it had not been for this Azadari, Namaz Jama'at would not have existed. And then Sayyid Adil al-Alawi translates the statement from Farsi to Arabic. He says, Uskut. He says what he meant by this Farsi statement was Uskut, meaning shut up. Lawla hadhihi al-mawakib lama kanat salatul jama'ah. Had it not been for these processions and these commemorations and this Azadari that's going on, there would be no Salatul Jama'ah. Ya'ni. So then he further gives commentary. He says, because maybe some people might have difficulty digesting that an Ayatollah could say this. But he's saying, yes, his actual intent and intention was to say, Ya'ni da'hum yuqimuna al-aza'a ala sayyidi shuhada. He meant to tell the Mukabbir, let them engage in the Azah and let them establish the Azah of Sayyid al-Shuhada. فَلَوْلَا هَذِهِ الْمَرَاسِمِ وَهَذِهِ الْمَآتِمِ, because had it not been for these rituals and these mourning ceremonies, لَأَنْكَرَ أَعْدَاؤُنَا عَلَيْنَا قِصَّةَ عَاشُورَا, our enemies would have rejected in front of us the story of Ashura, وَظُلْمَ يَزِيدَ وَأَتْبَاعَهِ, وَظُلْمَ يَزِيدَ وَأَتْبَاعِهِ. They would have rejected the dhulm of Yazid and his followers. لَعَنَهُمُ May Allah's curse be upon them. كَمَا أَنْكَرَ بَعْضُهُمْ قِصَّةَ الْغَدِيرِ, the way some of them rejected the story of Ghadir. And then Sayyid Adil al-Alawi, the author of this book, the student of Sayyid Marashi Najafi, goes on to say, Ajal, he says, yes, اعتقاده بقضية سيد الشهداء وإحياء ذكره مما يبهر الإنسان. He says, yes, indeed, the belief that Sayyid Marashi Najafi had in as far as the case of Sayyid al-Shuhada is concerned and the importance of keeping his memory alive is concerned, His belief in this matter is something that will cause the human being to be amazed and to be puzzled and to be flabbergasted. So normally when the traditional awam and lay people, sometimes when they hear this, an incident like this, they're unable to believe that you can actually have an Ayatollah al-Uzma, a high-level 12er Imami Shia scholar, and he, when there are two groups of people, one group is trying to continue the Azadari at the time of Salah, okay, and the other group or the other person is trying to say that no, let us stop the Azadari right now, let us honor the time of prayer and let us actually offer the Salah. You would expect that the Ayatollah al-Uzma would support the Mukabbir, who's actually saying, let us discontinue the commemoration and let us pray. But here you see the exact opposite. You see an Ayatollah al-Uzma actually supporting the popular trend, which is let the Azah go on, even though he has come to lead the Salatul Jama'ah, but he's not concerned that people should, because he had come here, he says he came to the Sahn, the courtyard of Sayyid al-Ma'suma for Salatul Jama'ah. He used to lead Salatul Jama'ah in the courtyard of Sayyid al-Ma'suma. But when the Mukabbir is telling people, okay, people stop doing the Azadari, stop the Zanjir and all the Matam and everything, and let me give the Azan because your voices are so loud, the Azan will not be heard. And let us be miqdari Salatul Jama'ah, at least for the amount of time that is required to offer Salatul Jama'ah, at least lower your voices and let us focus on the prayer. And instead of supporting him, this Ayatollah actually scolds the Mukabbir and he sides with the members of the general public. And remember, for those of you who might think, who is this Ayatollah Sayyid Adil al-Alawi? Ayatollah Sayyid Adil al-Alawi is a mujtahid from the Hawza Ilmiya of Qum, the one writing this incident and reporting this about his teacher. Yeah, he's a mujtahid from the Hawza Ilmiya of Qum. He used to teach Bahthul Kharij in the Hawza Ilmiya of Qum. If you can see, this is his photo and this is his website. His website is alawi.net/Arabic. You can find his biography over here, As-Sira Zatiya. He has his ijazat of ijtihad, and the Maraji Izam have written praises for him. So he's someone well known in the scholarly Hawzawi community. I'm saying this because some people, they have a tendency to go into denial mode when they hear incidents like this. They're like, no, who is the one who's reporting this? Well, this is Ayatollah Sayyid Adil al-Alawi. You can check out his website. You can check out his durus. You can see Kharij al-Fiqh. Until his death, he was teaching Bahthul Kharij in the Hawza of Qum. He also had, he has a page on Wiki Shia. He has durus and lectures that he gives in Ilm al-Rijal, which are, as you can see here, durus fi Ilm al-Rijal. So he's quite a senior figure. And he's well known within the scholarly community. And he's the one who is writing this incident. So there is no scope for doubting it. And by the way, he's not writing this to condemn Ayatollah Mar'ashi Najafi. Rather, as you can see, the whole chapter, if you read the chapter, he's trying to show you how Ayatollah Mar'ashi Najafi was consumed by his love and by his devotion to Imam Hussain alayhi salam. But obviously, I think all of you will agree with me that this is the wrong kind of devotion. This is basically ghulu. When you try to honor Imam Abu Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salam and honor his memory by destroying and by trampling upon the very objectives for which Imam Hussain alayhi salam gave his life. Do you not accept that Imam Hussain alayhi salam was fighting in defense of the Quran and the Sunnah? Was he not fighting in defense of the Deen? And is not salat and prayer the foundation and the pillar of the religion? And just compare this and contrast this, if you will, with the actual ashab of Imam Hussain alayhi salam who had the pure, the true love for Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Love that is free of all forms of ghulu. Here in front of you, we have the authentic maqtal, which is authenticated by Ayatollah al-Sheikh Muhammad al-Raysha'ri as per his methodology. It's called As-Sahih min Maqtali Sayyidi Shuhada. وأصحابه. I think parts of it have been translated into English and published as Chronicles of Karbala. Here, if you come to page 702, he talks about Salatul Jama'ah bi Imamatil Hussain fi Dhuhri Ashura. Salatul Zuhr, and how it was offered by Imam Hussain alayhi salam in congregation, in Jama'ah, on the day of Ashura. Can you imagine? Here you have an Ayatollah trying to argue that on the day of Ashura, on the, somehow you can be lax about prayer because the Azadari which is going on is somehow more important. Well, Imam Hussain alayhi salam, whose memory and whose martyrdom you are commemorating, he did not miss Salah on the very day of Ashura. In the authentic Maqtal, for example, the Maqtal of Abu Mikhnaf, which is preserved by Tabari, with his sanad going to Hamid ibn Muslim, he says that when the time for Dhuhr came, رأى ذلك أبو ثمامة عمرو بن عبد الله الصائدي. Okay? Abu Thumama, Amr bin Abdullah al-Sa'idi, was a companion of Imam Hussain alayhi salam and his true Shia and supporter. And as soon as he noticed that the time for Zuhr has come, he came to Imam Hussain alayhi salam and he said, Ya Aba Abdullah, nafsi lakal fida. He said, Oh Aba Abdullah, may my soul be your ransom. Inni ara ha'ula'i qad iqtarabu mink. I have seen your enemies are drawing closer to you. Wala wallah, and I swear by Allah, la tuqtalu hatta uqtala dunak. You shall not be killed until I have been killed in front of you, defending you and fighting for you. Insha'Allah, God willing. وأحب أن ألقى ربي وقد صليت هذه الصلاة التي دنا وقتها. But it is my ardent desire that I should meet my sustainer, I should meet my creator, after having offered this salah whose time has come. So you can see the true Shia and Ashab of Abi Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salam are people who in the thick of jihad on the day of Ashura, in the heat of the battle, they remember salah and they want to stop fighting in order to offer the salah. They're not having this mentality that, oh no, how can we stop the battle and fight? Because then if, the way Sayyid al-Mar'ashi Najafi was arguing that agar Azadari nabud, namaz-e jama'at nabud, this lousy argument that if it was not for Azadari, there would be no Salatul Jama'ah. The Ashab of Imam Hussain could also have argued like this and said, well, if we don't give our lives today in defense of Islam, there will be no Salah. But you see, they did not have this kind of twisted mindset. They did not have this deviant understanding that somehow, in order to achieve the goals, you can abandon and destroy the obligations and foundations of the Sharia and foundations of Islam. So this Sahabi of Imam Hussain alayhi salam says, no, I want to meet Allah, but after offering this Salah. And look at the response of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Did Imam Hussain alayhi salam, the way Sayyid al-Mar'ashi reacted to that mukabbir, telling him, Sakit bash, shut up. If it had not been for the Azadari, there would be no namaz jamaat. Is this reflective of the response of Imam Hussain alayhi salam? Imam Hussain alayhi salam could have said to him, shut up, what are you talking about salah right now? Don't you see the enemies have surrounded us? They're raining swords and arrows. So how are we supposed to offer salah when they are not giving us any rest from fighting? But no, Imam Hussain alayhi salam raised his head. He said, Zakarta salah. He said, you've made mention of salah. جعلك الله من المصلين الذاكرين. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make you among those who are musallin, among those who are the most particular about their prayers, and among those who are always engaged in the remembrance and zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so from this, one of the things you can derive from this is that the station and the rank of those who are particular in prayer and those who engage in the remembrance of Allah, their station and their rank is even higher than the rank of the shuhada. Because Imam Hussain alayhi salam would only pray for a promotion for his sahabi, right? Does it make sense to you that he would pray for a demotion? If the rank of the shuhada of Karbala is higher than the rank of the one who is among the musallin and the dhakirin, then why would Imam alayhi salam pray for Allah to raise him and make him among the Musallin al-Dhakirin. It shows you that the Musallin al-Dhakirin have such a high station that Imam Hussain alayhi salam is praying that his own ashab should be promoted and placed with the Musallin and Dhakirin. So that shows you the absolute high station of Salah and dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the world view of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. He knows that this companion of his is going to be martyred with him because the companion has already taken an oath. He has said, Wala wallah, I swear by Allah, you Imam Hussain will not be killed until I shall be killed fighting in front of you and in defense of you. So he knows this Sahabi is going to be martyred, and yet he prays for him. May Allah make you and place you with the Musallin, with those who are very particular about their prayers and with those who are constantly engaged in his remembrance. And then the Imam goes on to say, Na'am, yes, هَذَا أَوَّلُ وَقْتِهَا. This is indeed the awwal waqt, the prime time of Salatul Zuhr. ثم قال سلوهم أن يكفوا عنا حتى نصلي. He said, why don't you appeal to them to stop the battle so that we can pray? And at that point, Al-Husayn ibn Tamim says, إنها لا تقبل. What do you people want? He's telling the army of Imam Hussain, what do you people want to pray for? Your salah will not be accepted. At which point Habib ibn Mudahir says, لا تقبل. He says, what do you mean it won't be accepted? زعمت الصلاة من آل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم لا تقبل وتقبل منك يا حمار. He said, are you claiming that the salat will not be accepted from the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it will be accepted from donkeys like you? And then he goes on to say, Abu Thumama as-Sa'idi fought on that day. He killed his own cousin who was on the side of the enemies, and they prayed Salatul Zuhr. Imam Hussain alayhi salam prayed Salatul Khawf with them, and then after Salatul Zuhr, the battle continued and it became even more and more intense. So what are we seeing here? We are seeing that Imam Hussain alayhi salam, because he is fighting for the cause of Islam, he is fighting for the revival of the Kitab and the Sunnah of the Prophet. For him, missing Salah on the day of Ashura is absolutely not an option. Even if the enemies do not give him reprieve, even if they continue to fire arrows and shower spears, he will establish the Salah. And it is indeed one of the most glorious salawat that have ever been established in the history after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, and basically, one of the most important lessons you learn from this is that once you present the correct and authentic maqtal, which unfortunately is not presented that often, you begin to see the real historical Imam Hussain alayhi salam. But unfortunately, when you go to the practice that is there in our communities, and even sometimes the scholarship in our communities, as you can see from this incident, where you have a senior high-ranking Ayatollah actually supporting those who don't want to pray and opposing the person who is trying to establish prayers. From this, you can already see that the aza of Imam Hussain alayhi salam and the whole philosophy of this aza has been derailed in some sections of the Shia community, where you are having these deviant ideas that somehow in the name of aza for Imam Hussain alayhi salam, we can compromise on the obligations of Islam. We can compromise on salah and on fasting and all the other things. They can take a back seat. They can become secondary matters. Whereas the reality is that the Imam's teachings and the Imam's actual vision is purely revival of the Quran and Sunnah and revival of the teachings of Islam. I will also mention here an incident. When I was in Minnesota in 2014, there was actually a group of Desi ladies. They were from Hyderabad. They actually came to me and complained to me about the Khoja ladies in that community. And alhamdulillah, this is where I would like to take an opportunity to praise our Khoja communities. That alhamdulillah, in this matter, they have taken this issue seriously and they have not fallen for this ghulu model of scholarship. Rather, they have actually tried to stick to the legacy of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So in Minnesota, I was approached by this group of Desi Hyderabadi ladies who came to me because I was reciting majalis over there. I was giving lectures, and they complained to me and they said that these Khoja ladies, please talk to them and admonish them. because unfortunately, it is very sad for us to see their behavior. So I said, what is wrong with these Khoja sisters that you're talking about? Or what complaint do you have? They said, oh, these Khoja ladies, they don't have love for Abu Abdullah Hussain. And they are very lacking when it comes to devotion to Azadari and devotion to Imam Hussain alayhi salam. I said, what makes you say that? They said, well, we usually have majlis in the morning at around 11, 12, our majlis begins. And so sometimes after the majlis is over and the matam is still going on, it is time for Salatul Zuhr. As soon as the time for Salatul Zuhr comes, these Khoja ladies, they intervene. And they tell us to wrap up and finish the Azadari so that we can pray Salatul Jama'ah. So they were actually complaining against the Khoja ladies and saying, see, this is a sign that they don't have. I mean, okay, we don't deny that Salah and all of this is also important, they were saying. But Azadari comes first. And we shouldn't be so meticulous and so particular that as soon as awwal waqt of Salah has come, we just abandon everything. I mean, namaz can wait. Let the Azadari go on for a few hours, and then, namaz we can even pray at home, we can pray at other times. And my jaw dropped as I was listening to this. I was like, wow, subhanallah, this is the public perception. That when you have sisters within your own community, and so many du'as came from my heart for those ladies and for those sisters in Minnesota who actually do this. And I imagine in many other Khoja communities around the world, this would happen both on the ladies and the gents side, where there are people in the community who are very particular about Salah time, and they refuse to allow Azadari to detract or distract people from Salah. But sadly, you have an opposing current against these kinds of mu'mineen and against these kinds of believers. Within our own communities, people who have this kind of mindset, unfortunately, the ghulu influence mindset. And a lot of these lay people, they don't even know that there are ayatullahs who also support this kind of mindset. But this is why the message here at Islaah always has been that, look, you can't blindly follow ayatullahs, okay? Just because someone has a huge turban on his head, just because someone is massively respected and very popular in the community and his scholarship is celebrated, does not necessarily mean that he is following the Ahlul Bayt in everything. I showed you the very stark contrast between Ayatollah Sayyid Shahabuddin al-Mar'ashi Najafi and between Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So now you have a clear choice. Are you going to follow the deviant model of ghulu influenced scholarship, or are you going to follow Imam Hussain alayhi salam and his original ashab, the true Shia, who were so particular about Salah that they were not willing to miss Salah even on the battlefield of Karbala in the heat of the moment? So this is a choice that we have to make, not only on this issue, by the way, on so many other issues in which ghulu has penetrated our belief system, our fiqh, our rituals. In all of these areas, a lot of the times the general public, they try to hide behind scholars. No, but the maraji, no, but the ayatullahs, no, but the scholars. Baba, don't look at what the scholarship is doing. They're not hujjah on you on the day of judgment. Look at what the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam did. Look at what Imam Hussain alayhi salam said and did. Look at what his ashab said and did. Look at what the rest of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam said and did. Once you have identified what they did, don't care what any other scholar or what any other person says, right? They're not going to benefit you. They're not going to save you on the day of judgment. So I hope in light of this, at least one aspect that I've been trying to highlight, which is the derailment and the deviation of the vision of Azadari away from the objectives of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Imam Hussain's objectives are revival of Quran and Sunnah and following the deen and the Sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whereas in certain circles, you have the reverse and the opposite model, which is in the name of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, and in the name of his Azadari, and in the name of honoring his memory, we are going to violate and trample upon the injunctions and the commands and the obligations which have been imposed on us by the Quran and Sunnah. You have these two very distinct models. One model which is saying that because Imam Hussain alayhi salam was all about revival of Quran and Sunnah, therefore the correct way to honor his memory and revive his remembrance is to honor the Quran and Sunnah in your own practical life. And on the other hand, you have this model which is saying, no, Imam Hussain alayhi salam, we don't care, well, billah, what objectives he was martyred for, what his goal was, what his vision was. That is history now. We now have to innovate new rituals to keep his remembrance alive, which violate the very principles for which Imam Hussain alayhi salam stood up. So if you look at this aspect and this model of scholarship, definitely I think we can all acknowledge that this model of scholarship is definitely not part of the solution, it is part of the problem. But on the other hand, you have a countercurrent as well within the 12-hour Imami Shia scholarship that is represented, for example, by the likes of this Ayatollah As-Sayyid Ali Al-Husseini Al-Khamenei. Okay, Imam Khamenei has this book of lectures that was published, and it's entitled Al-Thawra Al-Husayniyya Khasa'is wa Murtakazat. Okay, the revolution of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, its unique qualities and its key points of focus. This is a series of lectures that he delivered during Muharram. They were published separately in this book. There are some interesting insights that he shares. For example, when he talks about the ta'thirat, the impact and the blessings of Ashura, one of our members had asked the question about black clothes and black being the symbol of commemorations. He also gives Ayatollah Khamenei, he gives his insight on this. He says that the revolution of the Abbasids, okay, who rose against the Banu Umayyah in the middle of the 2nd century, and they sent missionaries to different parts of the Islamic world, such as Khorasan, and when they finally succeeded in eliminating and eradicating the rule of the Umayyads, which was oppressive and arrogant and based on racism, he says the whole Abbasid revolution, it began in the name of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So he's talking about how the name of Imam Hussain alayhi salam and his memory has actually been abused and misused by insincere elements throughout history as well. So the Abbasid revolution, okay, it actually began in the name of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. فلو طالعتم التاريخ للاحظتم أن دعاة بني العباس عندما كانوا ينتشرون. He says, if you read the history of the Abbasid revolution, you will notice that those who are calling towards the Banu Abbas, their missionaries, they were actually scattering. So this is on page 123. They were scattering around in the cities of the Islamic world. كانوا يتخذون من دم الحسين بن علي واستشهاده ومن الانتقام لدم ابن الرسول وبضعة الزهراء عليها السلام وسيلة لتنظيم حملاتهم الإعلامية. He says they made the blood of Imam Hussain alayhi salam and his martyrdom a tool, and calling people to seek revenge for the blood of the son of the Prophet and Bibi Fatima. They made it a tool of propaganda in as far as their propaganda war was concerned. And then he goes on to say, حتى أن السواد الذي أصبح شعارا ولباسا رسميا لبني العباس طوال 500 عام من حكمهم قد انتخب كلباس حداد على الإمام الحسين عليه السلام. He says, and the color black, as-sawad, the color black, which later became the symbol and the official color of mourning for the Banu al-Abbas for the 5 centuries that they ruled, the 500 years that they ruled. This black color was actually introduced by the Banu al-Abbas, and they introduced it, they chose it as a symbol to signify their mourning for Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And they used to say, حيث كانوا يقولون, they used to say, هذا حداد آل محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. They used to say that we wear black out of grief and mourning for the Ali Muhammad. هكذا بدأ العباسيون ثورتهم. This is how the Abbasids began their revolution. وأوجدوا هذا التغيير. And this is how they brought about change. وإن كانوا قد انحرفوا وانتهجوا نفس سياسة بني أمية بعد ذلك. Even though after that they deviated and they started following the policy of the Bani Umayyah after that. So you can see he shares this insight on how the color black as a sign of mourning was not introduced by the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Rather, it was something that was actually introduced by the Banu al-Abbas. And then, if you see, he has lectures in which, for example, he goes on to condemn very openly and frankly all these attempts that are made by people to express grief in extreme ways. So here, for example, when he talks about this practice of hitting the heads with swords, he says this is a recent innovation. إنه عمل خاطئ. He says this is clearly an incorrect practice. أن يشج البعض رؤوسهم بالسيوف. That people should, actually cut open their heads with swords as an expression of grief for Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Then he asks the critical question: وما هو الحاصل من إراقة دمائهم بهذه الصورة? What do you gain? What good comes out of shedding their blood in this manner? And how can we count this action among the marasim, among the rituals of Azadari? He says, I can understand ajal min marasim al-aza al-latm ala ru'us wa sudur. He says, up to the point of, hitting your heads and chest with your bare hands. I mean, that part, okay, you can say it is among the rituals of Aza. But bloodletting and hitting the head with the swords and shedding blood, this is something that is not permissible. Even if you're someone who is very near, a near relative of yours passes away, you're not allowed to do this. This is a bid'ah, walaysat min ad-din. It is not part of religion. And there is no doubt that Allah is not pleased with this. And then he goes on to answer the argument that why did the past scholars not condemn and not ban this? So he says, look, the past scholars did not ban this because their hands were tied. You see. Also, he acknowledges that Shia scholarship is not always in a position to openly speak out against evils that are popular in society. Sometimes they find their hands are tied. But he says today we have the era of the Islamic government, right? The Islamic revolution succeeded in Iran, and you have an Islamic government, and now we are not supposed to do anything that is going to distort and disfigure and damage the reputation and the image of the Islamic society, which is distinguished by love for the Ahlul Bayt, and which actually takes pride in the fact that it is associated with the Imam of the time, and with the Imam Hussain alayhi salam, and with Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. كيف? How? ينبغي أن لا نقوم بأعمال تصور أبناء هذا المجتمع بأنهم أناس خرافيون وغير منطقيين أمام المسلمين وغير المسلمين في العالم. He says it does not befit us that we should do actions that will portray our community as people who are people of khurafat, people who worship superstitions, and people who are irrational. We don't want to give off this image to the Muslims and to the non-Muslims of the world. And that's why he goes on to say that I must warn our people against this kind of thing. He then goes on to say that in the past this used to be done in private, so it would not affect the image of the school. But now he says, أما أن ينطلق عدة آلاف من الأشخاص فجأة في أحد شوارع مدينة قم أو طهران أو إحدى مدن خراسان وأذربيجان وهم يحملون السيوف ليشجوا بها رؤوسهم فإن هذا العمل يعتبر خلافا بلا ريب ولا يرضى عنه الإمام الحسين. But he says today, for a group, all of a sudden, for a group of 1,000 people to appear on the streets in a metropolitan city like Tehran or Qum or other cities like Khorasan and Azerbaijan, and they're carrying swords and they're beating their heads and they're letting out blood, he says this is definitely something Imam Hussain alayhi salam would not be proud of. He would never be happy with this. And he says, I don't understand where these practices have come to Islamic societies from. This is a bid'ah, and it is a very strange and weird bid'ah. And he then goes on to talk about another bid'ah, which is the bid'ah of actually crawling to the darih of the imams. And he says if this was really mustahab, this is his key argument. He says if any of these rituals were mustahab or mustahsan, yani desirable, laqama bihi ulama'un al-kibar, then our greatest scholars would have been doing them. The fact that the Maraja themselves don't engage in these kinds of rituals should show you that there is something wrong with them. Otherwise, if they were mustahab and if they were good, then the ulama themselves would have done that. And then he goes on to cite the fatwa of Marhum Ayatullah al-Uzma al-Burjurdi against kissing the threshold of the bari' and all of these things which are fatawi that he gave in order to prevent people from giving the impression of shirk. So in any case, there's a lot more that can be said in this regard. But to conclude, yes, definitely there are different voices, different trends within the 12-hour Imami Usuli school. You have some voices which are pro-ghulu, some voices which are anti-ghulu, but only up to a certain level. You have some voices which are anti-ghulu all the way. So ultimately, the sect is in flux right now. And we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq to actually follow the true teachings of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, and to stand by what they actually stood for, and to revive the deen as per their authentic and their original teachings. For tonight, very quickly, we will go into the original maqtal of Abu Mikhnaf, which has been reconstructed by Sheikh Hadi al-Yusufi al-Gharawi, Muhammad al-Hadi al-Yusufi al-Gharawi, the maqtal of Ali ibn al-Hussain al-Akbar, okay, the eldest son of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, who was named Ali al-Akbar. And it mentions here that وَكَانَ أَوَّلَ قَتِيلٍ مِنْ بَنِي أَبِي طَالِبٍ يَوْمَئِذٍ. He was the first to be killed from among the descendants of Abu Talib. And his name was Ali al-Akbar bin al-Hussain bin Ali. His mother was Layla, the daughter of Abu Murrah bin Urwa bin Mas'ud al-Thaqafi. So this is again described by a soldier who is embedded in the enemy lines. He says he came in front of us, Ali al-Akbar, and he was reciting the lines of poetry saying, Ana Ali ibn al-Hussain ibn Ali, nahnu wa rabbil bayt, awla bin nabi, tallah la yahkumu fina ibn al-da'i. When Ali al-Akbar marched towards the army of Yazid, he recited these lines. He said, I am Ali, the son of Hussein, the son of Ali. We, by the Lord of the house, are more worthy of the Prophet. Yani we are the family of the Prophet. We have the greater right over the Prophet. Tallah la yahkumu fina ibn al-da'i. We swear by Allah, the son of the illegitimate ruler shall not rule over us. He's referring here to Ibn Ziyad. فَفَعَلَ ذَلِكَ مِرَارًا. And then he attacked the army of Yazid a number of times. And at that point, Murrah ibn Munqidh bin al-Nu'man al-Abdi saw him, and he said, عَلَيَّ آثَامُ الْعَرَبِ إِن مَرَّ بِي يَفْعَلْ مِثْلَ مَا كَانَ يَفْعَلْ إِن لَمْ أُثْكِلْهُ أَبَا. He said, may the sins of all the Arabs be upon us or upon me if I do not make his father mourn his death. And so he proceeded, and as Ali al-Akbar attacked the people with his sword, he was attacked by Murrah ibn Munqidh, فَطَعَنَهُ فَصُرِعَ. So Murrah ibn Munqidh struck him with a spear. And so Ali al-Akbar, this beloved son of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, fell to the ground. وَاحْتَوَاهُ النَّاسِ. And people surrounded him. Once he fell to the ground, the soldiers fell upon him. فَقَطَّعُوهُ بِأَسْيَافِهِمْ. So they cut him up with their swords. And then Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam came to him and he said, قَتَلَ اللَّهُ قَوْمًا قَتَلُوكَ. May Allah kill the people who killed you, O my beloved son, Ya Bunayya. مَا أَجْرَأَهُمْ عَلَى الرَّحْمَنِ. How audacious are these people in disobeying their all-merciful Creator. وَعَلَى انْتِهَاكِ حُرْمَةِ الرَّسُولِ. How daring and how audacious are these people in violating the sanctity of the beloved messenger. عَلَى الدُّنْيَا بَعْدَكَ الْعَفَاءِ. Fie upon this world after you. And a particular reason why Imam Hussain alayhi salam used to love this son of his is mentioned in another report of Abu Mikhnaf, which is actually not preserved by Ibn Jarir al-Tabari, but it is preserved by Abu al-Faraj, who mentions that Imam Hussain alayhi salam, his particular reason for his attachment to Ali al-Akbar was that at the time he was advancing towards the enemy, Imam Hussain alayhi salam had actually said, Allahumma anta shaheed alayh. O Allah, kun anta shaheed alayh. Be a witness against these people and against him now. فَقَدْ بَرَزَ إِلَيْهِمْ غُلَامٌ أَشْبَهُ الْخَلْقِ بِرَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ وَسَلَّمَ. Because now a young man has advanced towards them who among all of the creation bears the most striking resemblance with your messenger. And so Ali al-Akbar was someone who had the most striking resemblance to Rasulullah, and yet despite this fact, they brutally killed him and they tore him into pieces. And together with him, perhaps we can also go into the masa'ib of the youngest son of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, who's also mentioned in the maqtal of Abu Mikhnaf here. Although his name is given as Abdullah ibn al-Hussein, he is al-Radi'. And he's called al-Radi' because he was still being breastfed. And so in this riwayah, it is mentioned that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was seated. He was sitting on the floor outside the tent, and this little baby was brought and was given to him. فَأَجْلَسَهُ فِي حِجْرِهِ. And so Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam made him sit in his lap. فَهُوَ فِي حِجْرِهِ إِذْ رَمَاهُ أَحَدُ بَنِي أَسَدٍ. And so he was in the lap of his father Abu Abdullah al-Hussein when one of the Banu Asad, who the Muhaqqiq has ascertained was Harmala or Hurmala ibn Kahil or Hani bin Thubayt al-Hadrami, he struck him with an arrow, فَذَبَحَهُ. And so he slaughtered him at that point. فَتَلَقَّى الْحُسَيْنُ دَمَهُ. And the blood of this little baby fell into the lap of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. فَلَمَّا مَلَأَ كَفَّهُ صَبَّهُ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And so when his hands became full of the blood of this little baby of his, he called out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he said, رَبِّ إِن تَكُ حَبَسْتَ عَنَّا النَّصْرَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ فَاجْعَلْ ذَلِكَ لِمَا هُوَ خَيْرٌ وَانْتَقِمْ لَنَا مِنْ هَؤُلَاءِ الظَّالِمِينَ. He said, O my sustainer, O my Lord, if your decree has seen it fit to withdraw victory from us on this day, then make this outcome in our favor. And we ask you to punish those who have oppressed us and to take revenge from them on our behalf. And at this point, the narrative comes to an end. May the peace, blessings, and mercy of Allah be upon our beloved Mazlum Imam Abu Abdullah al-Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam, upon his Ahlul Bayt, upon his family, and upon all of his companions.
How brutal were these people? How evil were they? How do you, I mean, you've seen the Prophet. It's not very, the time that has passed is maybe 40 years, 50 years from the time the Prophet dies until Karbala happens. So, I mean, these people are aware of what the Prophet looked like. There must have been some sort of, explanation of how his face was, or how Ali al-Akbar looked like the Prophet, and still they would go against and they would do such a thing.
Indeed, Imam Hussain alayhi salam in his sermon actually refers to the fact that istahwada alaykum shaytan. Shaytan has taken control of you. فَأَنْسَاكُمْ ذِكْرَ اللَّهِ الْعَظِيمِ. He has made you forget the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so basically, once the taqwa, once consciousness and remembrance of Allah abandons us, and once it goes out of our life, then basically there is no moral compass and there is no sense of decency left to prevent a person from stooping to the worst levels of inhumane behavior and barbarism.
But 3 days ago, you were talking about Janabi Qasim, and you said when the murderer of Janabi Qasim was talking to Hamid ibn Muslim, and he said, by the Lord, I am going to go and martyr this young man. So in their mouths, they were like they were reciting the name of the Lord and all this. And even right now, when you say, Habib ibn Mazahir tells the guys, like, what do you mean that our prayer is not going to be accepted? That meant that they prayed as well. So who are they praying to? Who were they, like, the zikr that they were doing was towards whom?
Exactly. I mean, they were praying to the same Lord. The Qibla was the same. They believed in the same Prophet. And this is what the Ashab of Imam Hussain alayhi salam tried to admonish them and reason with them, saying that, look, with us is the grandson of the messenger and the prophet that you believe in, and we believe in him. So how are you going to show your face to the messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the day of judgment if you meet him on the day of judgment and you have the blood of his beloved grandson on your hands? How will you meet him on the day of judgment? But the reality is that this is what happens when there is no taqwa, and also when the love of dunya. You see, the army that came to kill Imam Hussain alayhi salam, they're majority people of Kufa. And some of the commanders were actually those who actually invited Imam Hussain alayhi salam to come to Kufa. And that's why Imam Hussain alayhi salam stood in front of them and he told Uqba bin Sim'an, the slave of Rabab, he said, bring out the letters. He brought sacks full of letters. And then he called out the names of those people from the army of Kufa. And he said that, you so-and-so and you so-and-so, did you not write to me asking me to come here? And Al-Hur bin Yazid al-Riyahi also used this argument against the army of Yazid. He said, look, I did not even invite them to come. Hur was not among the people who wrote to Imam Hussain saying, you come to us. But he says, even though I did not invite him, now that he has come, I have the decency to defend him because I know he's the grandson of the Prophet. So what is happening to you? The reality is that this is what shows you how dangerous love of dunya is. As the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam used to say, حُبُّ الدُّنْيَا رَأْسُ كُلِّ خَطِيئَةٍ. Love of this world is the mother and it's the head of all sins. It is the key that opens the door. So these people, naturally, they were siding with Ibn Ziyad because he was offering them the dunya. He was offering them worldly pleasures. He was offering them money and positions in power and authority. And so these are people who basically sold their hereafter for their dunya. And that is the biggest loss that a person can incur according to the Quran.
We are at loss. I'm saying I am at loss. I shouldn't say we. I said I am at loss. Because today, if I was offered the seat to any one of our sort of jamaats or federations or whatever, I would fight for it. Because there is fame. There is, my ego is going to be sort of pumped up. And I'll be selling my soul. So how can we bravely stand up and say we are the followers of Ali and we are the followers of Imam Hussain? And how can we shed a tear knowing in the deepest of our hearts, I mean, we are the judges of ourselves. How can we do this and be able to sleep at night? I wonder.
True. I mean, this is the thing. Every human being has this voice inside them that can justify all their evil for them. So yes, people do experience the pricking of the conscience, and they do experience that voice inside them that admonishes them and that tells them of everything that's wrong in their life. But there are some people who develop a degree of expertise in silencing that voice, the voice of reason, the voice of the conscience, and they keep on silencing it and trampling upon it until it becomes really weak. And at a certain point, it goes mute. If a person constantly keeps on silencing their conscience, a time will come when the conscience becomes dead because you have suppressed it so much that it no longer has any authority and any sway over you. And that's why the Imams of Ahlul Bayt used to say that, O son of Adam, you are upon khair so long as that voice inside you is alive. It's admonishing you, it's scolding you for the wrong that you do. As long as that voice is healthy, it is alive and kicking, you are still upon khair, even though you may be involved in some sins and you may be doing some stuff you're not supposed to do, but still the path of recovery and repentance is still there. There is still hope in you. The day that voice gets extinguished inside you, that is the day you are totally spiritually dead. So, I mean, people do find it a bit irksome and a bit annoying, that voice that's constantly hovering inside them. But that voice is just like, it's the physical equivalent of this is, for example, the pain sensors. The experience of physical pain is discomforting, but it's actually a big ni'mah and favor and blessing of Allah in our life. You can see this from those who suffer from diabetes, high blood sugar. One of the symptoms of that is that their legs and their arms become a little bit numb. And so look at how many precautions they have to take. They have to wear socks and they have to wear shoes and they have to really go out of the way to protect their feet, because the doctors tell them that you could actually end up injuring yourself and you could bleed to death and you would not even find out about it. So that's when you realize that the pain sensors that Allah has installed in your body, they're actually, even though they make life difficult for you and the experience of pain itself is not a very pleasant experience, but still you need it. It is very crucial. So in the same way, the voice of conscience inside us is also something we desperately need, and we need to be listening to it more often.
I mean, yeah, it should make us think. I think these are very, very enlightening sort of sessions that you are sharing. I guess if it doesn't remove the rust that has gathered in the last 300 days from my heart, and make me closer to the Lord and to the way that the warriors at the battlefield took prayers so put weight into it. I don't think today I wouldn't be here. So Alhamdulillah, I think that you're around and you're a wasila in a way. We have a few questions. Question that has been asked says, what's the justification Imamiya scholars give on Imam Hussain not doing taqiyya even in the month of Muharram when war is forbidden?
What is the justification for Imam Hussain alayhi salam not doing taqiyya?
Yes.
I think Imam Hussain alayhi salam is the Imam from the Ahlul Bayt who actually demonstrates that taqiyya is not something that befits an Imam. As in, taqiyya is allowed for the lay person, and taqiyya is allowed for the person who is not assuming or campaigning to assume leadership of the ummah. So it's allowed for someone who is fearing for their life if they needed to save their life. But the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, they actually gave their lives for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, precisely because they were unwilling to do taqiyya in the matter of the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, but how will the 12er Imamiyya scholars justify it? This is indeed a problem for them, because they cannot reconcile. It's difficult to reconcile how Imam Hussain alayhi salam, if he had been a believer in taqiyya, then the whole event of Karbala just doesn't make sense, because he should have, if he was a believer in taqiyya, he would just have gone into hiding, or he would have stayed in his home, given the bay'ah to Yazid, and allowed Yazid to go ahead with his evil plan to destroy the Quran and the Sunnah. And he could have just said that, look, if I don't support Yazid, he's going to kill me, and saving my life is wajib, so I'm doing taqiyya. But the fact that Imam Hussain alayhi salam rose up and he stood up for the truth and he openly challenged Yazid, that goes to show you that the Imams of Ahlul Bayt were really brave Imams who did not fear anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so you just cannot make the case that, they were, well, a'yadhu billah, cowardly in the sense that they were using taqiyya.
That's interesting, actually, because you see the both. I mean, the real side. There's another question that says, Jazakallah, dear Said, for your explanation. You should shed light on the topic of extreme mourning. So, what's the best way to spend the days of Muharram?
So we have a lecture on extreme mourning and how Imam Hussain alayhi salam forbade it. That's a full 1 hour lecture that we delivered a couple of nights back, in which we showed you how Imam Hussain alayhi salam was not supportive. In fact, he personally and specifically requested Sayyidah Zainab salamullahi alayha not to engage in any form of extreme or intense mourning. And I also mentioned that people will try to put a spin on it and say, no, he said that because he did not want Sayyidah Zainab to show any sign of defeat to the army of Yazid. But if you actually go back to the text, you will notice that this justification or this interpretation does not fit in with the text. Because the Imam prefaces his remarks by pointing out how his death and his martyrdom is not a greater event than the martyrdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam and the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and Al-Hasan alayhi salam and Sayyidah Fatima. He says, look, dying and being killed has been the path of the righteous. So if I also walk down this path, don't make it into a bigger deal than it actually is. It is what it is. And look, ta'azzay bi azaillah. I'm not saying that you should not experience grief. But when you experience grief, seek solace in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have tawakkul and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Engage in His remembrance. And so how should we spend our days and nights during these months? We should spend them devoting ourselves to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, read more and more of the Quran, be more particular about the obligations of Islam, about your Salah, about fasting, about zakah, about Amr bil Ma'ruf, Nahi Anil Munkar. The aim of these majalis is supposed to be to have a platform where we get together, we diagnose and identify what's wrong in our communities, what's wrong in our societies, we identify the challenges that are facing us, and then we collectively deliberate and discuss what are the best ways to solve them. So there are a lot of ways, a lot of good positive ways in which you can honor the month of Muharram. You can increase and intensify your worship and remember it the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes you remember the sacrifice of Ibrahim alayhi salam during Hajj and Umrah. Is that during Hajj and Umrah, every single thing that you do, or almost every single thing that you do, it revolves around the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam and Sayyidah Hajar salamullahi alayha. Yet the dhikr and the focus is always on the that of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't see people in Hajj saying, Ya Ibrahim, labbaik, Ya Ibrahim, labbaik, Ya Hajar, labbaik, Ya Ismail. The dhikr is of Allah, but the remembrance is around the memory of Ibrahim alayhi salam.
Somebody has said, Salam, by any chance do we have an English version of the historical narration about the Abbasids who used Imam Hussein's name in fighting the Umayyad and the wearing of the black clothes? This was from Khamenei's book, I think.
Yes, yeah. This was from Ayatollah Sayyid Ali al-Khamenei's book. It was page 123 of this book, 124.
Is this by any chance translated into English?
I'm not aware. I don't think it has been translated. I've not seen any English translation of this. But these are, so this is page 123 of this book, where he talks about how they, black became the official color of mourning, and it was made the official color by the Abbasids. You know, their flags used to be black, they used to dress in black, and it was all to signify mourning for Imam Hussain alayhi salam and for the tragedies that befell the family of the Prophet. So this is page 123 of the book Al-Thawra al-Husayniyya, the revolution of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Okay, this is the book by Al-Imam Al-Khamenei, Al-Thawra al-Husayniyya, Khasa'is wa Murtakazat. The revolution of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, its unique characteristics and its point of focus.
I guess the member can actually look for it. There is a website here. Oh, that's Al Ma'arif.
Yeah, almaarif.org. This is basically the website of the publishers. They are Jam'iyyat al-Ma'arif al-Islamiyya al-Thaqafiyya, and this was published in the year 2001, 1422 AH.
Okay, all right.
So yeah, unfortunately, this is not available in English, as far as I can tell.
Right.
But we will, hopefully, inshallah, when the transcripts of these lectures are published, you will find translations for all the evidence that we have mentioned in it. So currently, Islaah is working on developing a website, and inshallah, on the website of Islaah, these lectures, together with all the evidence and references, the quotations and their translations with proper references, will be made available in due course of time. And we request the mu'mineen and the brothers and sisters to keep us in their du'as, and for Allah to bless this project with success, so that these things are seen in English as well and made available in English as well, inshallah.
We have 4 more questions on the chat. However, there's a hand, Brother Ali, if I'm not mistaken. You can unmute and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thanks, sir, for the insightful lecture. Sir, my question is regarding the 3 options which were put forward by Imam Hussain at the time they were negotiating with the Umar bin Saad and those were that whether Imam said that you can allow me to go to Yazid and talk face to face, and the second one was that you can allow me to go back to Medina, or where I came from, and the third one was that I can go to the borders of some other country. I mean, how authentic are these narrations which tells these like kind of negotiations between Imam and the enemy's camp? I mean, if this is true, then don't you think that Imam was like going for a particular reasons to uphold the sanctity of the religion? But at the same time, I mean, some people say that he wants to go back. So I'm a little bit confused that, or I'm not understanding what it is. So that's my question. Thanks.
Okay. So as far as your question is concerned, yes, this is mentioned by Abu Mikhnaf in his Maqtal. He claims that this is the position of the Muhaddithin, that Imam Hussain alayhi salam gave these 3 options. However, this is actually contradicted by the testimony of Uqba bin Sam'an. If you can see the screen, or Uqba bin Sam'an, if you can see the screen, here is Maqtal al-Hussain. That is according to the riwayah and the narration of Uqba bin Sam'an, who is Sahabi of Hazrat Sayyidu Shuhada alayhi salam. And he is the Ghulam of Janabe Rabab. And this Maqtal in 93 pages was actually published by Imamia Mission in Pakistan, in Lahore. And it was edited by my respected grandfather, Al-Marhum Sultan al-Wa'idhin Al-Mu'arrikh Al-A'zam Hazrat Allama Sayyid Mujtaba Hassan Kamunpuri Mujtahidul Asr. In this Maqtal, what he does is he isolates and extracts the reports of Uqba bin Sam'an, the slave of Janabe Rabab. Okay. And in this Maqtal, you will notice that if you go by his testimony, he testifies that he was with Imam Hussain alayhi salam until the very end. And he actually contradicts the claim of the Muhaddithin, who claim that Imam Hussain alayhi salam made these 3 conditions, or had these 3 options. He says, I was with Imam Hussain alayhi salam in his journey from Medina all the way to Mecca, from Mecca towards Kufa, then to Karbala, and then he was taken captive by Umar ibn Saad and released. because he said, I'm just a slave. So he says Imam Hussain alayhi salam never offered or never even considered any of these three options. These are part of the propaganda of his enemies to make him to disfigure his actual goals and his objectives. Rather, what Imam Hussain alayhi salam had offered them was that if the people of Kufa are no longer interested in supporting me, and you do not want me to come to Kufa, then leave me alone to go wheresoever I please, and let me do my thing. So yeah, we basically consider this report to be much more reliable and to be much more authentic because it's coming to us from someone who was extremely close to Imam Hussain alayhi salam.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So that means there are some things that are in the maqtal of Abu Mikhnaf that are not also sort of correct.
So there are places where Abu Mikhnaf will give you two reports. Right, Abu Mikhnaf is collecting reports about the incident of Karbala. So he will also, as I mentioned, some of his sources are people who are on the side of the army of Yazid. And some of his sources go all the way back to, they take their reports from Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam. So ultimately, yes, you have to keep both these things in mind. Abu Mikhnaf, but the good thing about Abu Mikhnaf, he's an early Shia and he produces both sides. He says, look, these are what the muhaddithin have been saying. This is what the muhaddithin have been saying. But obviously the muhaddithin are pro the army that came to fight Imam Hussain alayhi salam, or they're pro Yazid in this matter, because their narration and their narrative is trying to make it look like Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam was willing to give bay'ah to Yazid, because that's one of the offers that they claim Imam Hussain made, that he said, take me to Yazid and I will place my hand in his hand. And they say, some people try to justify this and say, well, maybe he wanted to do that to avoid death. Our response to that is, if he wanted to, so then why didn't he do that? They say, well, because Ibn Ziyad said, no, you have to surrender to me. So Imam Hussain was not prepared to surrender to Ibn Ziyad. So Baba, when you are looking to save your life, okay, at that point, all bets are off. At that point, you're not going to care whether you have to put your hands on the hand of Yazid or you have to put Ibn Ziyad or Shimar. A person who is looking to save his life will give his hand and swear allegiance to whosoever he needs to swear allegiance to in order to save his life. The fact that Imam Hussain alayhi salam refused to surrender to Shimr and refused to surrender to Umar ibn Sa'ad shows you that he was not, there were certain things that were such a strict no-no for him that he was prepared to sacrifice his life rather than accept those conditions.
Interesting. This is going to be a tough one. A brother is saying, after listening to these lectures and being told 70 to 80% of what we have been taught is based on lies, I'm starting to lose the emotional attachment towards Imam Hussain and the whole event of Karbala. Is that a bad thing? I feel guilty for not feeling grief and sadness anymore, and I feel upset and angered for being lied to all these years. How do I reconcile this?
So as far as the emotional attachment to Imam Hussain alayhi salam is concerned, by sifting out the lies and the fabrications, that should not be affected. Why? Because we are not loving Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Our love for Imam Hussain is not based on these fabricated narratives. Okay? Our love for Imam Hussain alayhi salam is not based on fake stories. Our love for him is based on a very solid foundation that no force in this world can take away from us, which is our love for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, our love for our beloved messenger, our love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So our hierarchy starts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Love for him causes us to love his messenger. Love for the messenger causes us to love Abu Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salam and to have that to have that emotional attachment to him. And that's why, my dear brothers and sisters, if you look at the maqtal as I presented it, let me just share with you. Even if you look at the authentic maqtal, you can see the emotional attachment is there. See, this is the maqtal of Sheikh Muhammad Ray Shahri. Look at Abu Thumama, the Sahabi of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, who reminded of the time of prayer. Look at his statement, Ya Aba Abdullah, nafsi lakal fida. He says, Oh Aba Abdullah, may my soul be your ransom. Okay, do you see the emotional attachment that he believes Imam al-Husayn's life and body is more precious than his own life and body? Why? Because this is the flesh and blood of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you have true love for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how can you not love the beloved grandson of Rasulullah? When you know that Rasulullah loved him so much that he said, Husaynun minni wa ana min Husaynin ahabba Allahu man ahabba Husayna. Hussein is from me and I am from Hussein. May Allah shower his love for whosoever shows love for Al-Hussein. And then look at this. La tuqtal hatta uqtala dunak. I swear by Allah, I will not allow you to be killed until I get killed first. Insha'Allah. And I want to, but you see his love for Imam Al-Hussein is being channelized in him saying that I want to meet my creator after having prayed this salah. So no, my dear brothers and sisters, sifting out the lies and fabrications is not going to affect your emotional attachment to Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. In fact, it's going to make you, once we present to you, and this time obviously because we were dealing with a lot of the theoretical foundations and concepts and how Azadari got detracted. But inshallah, when we have more detailed opportunities to present to you more of the maqtal of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, you get to see him in action. You get to see his ashab in action. Definitely your emotional attachment, your love, your admiration for them is going to increase to the next level, inshallah ta'ala.
Yeah, I think if we read the dua that we recite on the day of Arafah, dua for Imam Hussain, I think if we read it and just understand maybe just a little at a time, you will realize that if you have love for the person who talks to God like that, and if you understand how he talks to God, and if you are able to emulate, what he's saying, I think you don't need to cry for Imam Hussain. I think you will be rejoicing that you are on his side, and that you are attached to him. So I think the love of Imam Hussain is salvation more than anything else. It's known as Dua Arafah, right?
Yes, Arafah.
Dua Arafah by Imam Hussain. One of the questions says, do Sayyids fast on the 9th and 10th of Muharram?
Do what?
Do Sayyids fast on the 9th and 10th of Muharram?
He's asking about the Sayyids.
Yeah, like somebody like you.
Yeah, we definitely believe in fasting on the 9th and 10th of Muharram because it is substantiated by the authentic narrations of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, such as Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. Even after the event of Karbala, they promoted the fasting of Ashuras. So generally speaking, this is something that we aspire to, unless we are traveling and we are in a situation where it is not permissible, but generally speaking, it is something that we firmly believe in because the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam promoted it.
So it's not the way you said it, the staying hungry bit, the faqa.
Yeah, no. There is no such thing as faqa in Islam, as I had mentioned. Yeah, faqa is just an aborted and failed fast. When your fast does not achieve the spiritual goals, it's called faqa. It's just starvation. Because faqa is fasting without the thawab. Fasting, if you remove the thawab from it, then it's just faqa, right? It's just starvation.
There's one more question. Actually, no, there are two more questions. One question says, Assalamu alaikum, dear Sayyid Ali Hur. how would Imam Hussain react if he was not forced to give bayah by Yazid? Would he have stayed silent like the other companions or fought Yazid? It seems obvious that Imam Hussain considered Muawiyah differently than what Imam Hussain might have considered Yazid. No, sorry. It says it's obvious that Imam Hassan considered Muawiyah differently than what Imam Hussain might have considered Yazid. Or is it because the personalities were different that they reacted the way they reacted?
No, so Imam Hussain alayhi salam lived for 10 years under Muawiyah, under the rule of Muawiyah, after the demise of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. He lived for 10 years under Muawiyah, from the year 50 to the year 60. And throughout these 10 years, he followed the same policy of having that peace treaty as Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. So at that level, there is no difference between his stance and the stance of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. Yes, in the beginning, there are some reports that indicate that he was not in favor of a peace treaty with Muawiyah to begin with. But once the peace treaty had been signed, he was honor bound. And so he kept it in force and he honored it all the way until the death of Muawiyah. Now, if Yazid had not forced him for bay'ah, well, Imam Hussain alayhi salam's plan was actually, because the people of Kufa were sending him letters, they were writing to him saying that come and become our leader. And the reason for that was that the peace treaty between Imam Hassan and Muawiyah, the condition of that peace treaty was that Muawiyah is receiving the power. Imam Hassan alayhi salam is surrendering power to him. But the power after him will not go through hereditary succession. Rather, after Muawiyah dies, he has to return the power he took from Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam to Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. Or if Imam Hassan alayhi salam is not there, then there should be shura among the Muslims. And so the majority should decide who should rule over them. So you notice how as soon as Muawiyah dies, the peace treaty is now over. Because Muawiyah, the one with whom it was signed, is no longer alive. And number two, it was agreed that after Muawiyah dies, the power would not remain with the Banu Umayyah. It would come back either to Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam if he's alive, or it would go back to the shura of the Muslims, the way they had been selecting caliphs in the past. They would have a shura. So after Muawiyah dies, Imam Hussain alayhi salam sees that Yazid has forcefully come to power, because Muawiyah had already tried to install him in power and seek support from him even in his lifetime. So he knows that Yazid is an illegitimate ruler because he's not been elected by the shura. Rather, he's come through hereditary succession. He has grabbed power in that manner. And he sees the people of Kufa are writing letters to him. So that shows him that there is a whole shura that has gone on in Kufa, and a large majority of the Muslims actually want to see him in power. So he wanted to respond to this call and honor their shura and become the leader of the Muslim Ummah. So this is what he was on his way to Kufa for.
Right. All right. Final question for tonight. Would you say that Dr. Ali Shariati's vision of Imam Hussain and his mission had an effect on Iranian nation right before revolution?
That's believed by most historians of the Iranian Revolution. They do mention that Dr. Ali Shariati and his speeches, his discourses had a very profound impact on the revolutionaries. And which was it's ironic how after the revolution, they tried to bury and suppress his intellectual legacy. And even to this day, there are people who report that his books are banned in Iran, because apparently his revolutionary Shiaism, while it was very crucial in helping bring the revolution, but after the revolution was successful, they were not very interested in keeping people on that revolutionary spirit. So it was, yes, there is also talk of how it was suppressed and how his books were banned, and yeah.
To end, I will read a small thing that a friend of mine sent me yesterday. It's from Noam Chomsky, The Common Good, which was written in 1998. It says, the smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but allow very lively debate within that spectrum. Even encourage the more critical and dissident views. That gives people the sense that there is free thinking going on, while all the time the presuppositions of the system are being reinforced by the limits put on the range of the debate. So very, very key to what you just said about Ali Shariati.
Right. Thought-provoking indeed, definitely.
Yeah, indeed. Okay. Final question. You have some time? Okay. In a recent video, one of the reciters stated that poetic license is acceptable to our scholars, mujtahids, in narrating the tragedy of Karbala. Now, if the top scholarship is giving a free hand, then this problem will never be solved. So how can the laity ever break out of this culture?
Right. So I mentioned in previous lectures, and inshallah, perhaps we can dwell more on this, about how there is a body within the Maraja and the Mujtahideen. There are voices and there is scholarship that has actually challenged this. So starting from Al-Muhaddith An-Nuri, who was more of an akhbari, all the way to Ayatollah al-Sheikh al-Shaheed Murtada al-Mutahhari, Ayatollah al-Sheikh Muhammad al-Rayshahri, Ayatollah Sheikh Haydar Hubbullah, al-Sheikh Muhammad Sihhati al-Sirdarudi. These are all intellectuals and scholars within the 12-er Imami Shia establishment who have lambasted and condemned the abuse of poetic license, and particularly what is called lisanul hal, which is letting loose your imagination to imagine stuff that never really happened, but nonetheless you imagine it in order to make people cry. And I think this entire series that we have done has highlighted the devastating impact of this. So yes, I won't deny that there are aspects of there are circles or there are groups within the Shia scholarship who are very supportive of all the tahrifat and all the ghulu and all the deviation and diversion. But that is the body of scholarship that needs to be critiqued, they need to be resisted. And I think we should follow more of what the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam prescribed in this regard. They allowed poetry, and they do not condemn poetry in itself, but if you look at the poetry that was actually presented to them and which they approved of, it does not have any abuses of poetic license. It's just basic history. It's lamentation over the fact that such a big calamity befell the grandson of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, that his body was desecrated, that he was martyred, that he had no helpers. You know, it's just lamentations over historical facts. But you don't see the kind of fabricated khurafat-based narratives in that poetry that is recited before Imam Rida alayhi salam, for example, by Di'bil or by anyone else.
Thank you for bringing that, because I think the question that was asked actually had the name of Di'bil mentioned. So thank you for that. I guess we'll end here for tonight. Thank you for your time, for your knowledge, and may we all be towards the path of salvation, inshallah.
I mean, you might accept this.